nonprofits. There's an organization in Maryland called Maryland Nonprofits. They do have resources on their website. I think there's some things that are like behind a paywall so that you have to become a member of them to get to, but they do have, I think, some board training materials. In Montgomery County, there's also an organization called Nonprofit Montgomery, again, website materials, and from time to time they do board training. Also Leadership Montgomery. Certainly consultants like myself from an organization like Capacity Partners, we can do board training as well. And I've done that for some of the other villages in the area, but I'm not here to sell services or anything like that, but just there's a range of things that you can identify and people to get to do board trainings, board orientation, all that kind of thing for you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. But it is at different times in a board's life cycle, if you will, there are different needs. And like you said, there's a long-serving board chair who is stepping down. So this might be the moment as people are recalibrating, if you will, for some more defined time, more than just 10 minutes on a board meeting or something like that, to really take stock of where you are, what your needs are, how you want to go about handling those.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Do you mind if people just entered? I'd love to know what villages you're with and what your role is, whether you're board or staff. It seals that okay?
Yes, of course. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Hi,
go ahead.
I was going to say I'm Frank Catone. I'm with Greater Olney Go Rides, and we're an organization here that handles the Olney, Sandy Springs, Laytonsville area, and we provide rides for seniors. I'm the vice chair on the board. It's been a great session today, so great. Continue to learn more.
Great. Jerry.
Yeah, I'm Jerry Cooperman. I'm kind of a neighbor of yours. We're a little bit south of you in Stonegate, off of New Hampshire Avenue. Okay. I'm one of the co-founders of the Greater Stonegate Village. I have been on the board for 7 years. And I know it is time to roll off. And
careful what you get stuck with, Jerry.
I avoided being president up until last year. I was vice president, always had been program chair, person who hired staff and edited everything that left the village. But I've been there a long time. And as I said earlier, my issue is succession, really more than board relations. I come with a background of organization development, so relationships are not, that concerning to me. It's more like, how do we get fresh blood in?
That is a refrain I hear often from not only villages, but certainly other boards as well. And I'm in Silver Spring. I live in Silver Spring. My organization works throughout Montgomery County, so I do know Stonegate. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to kind of call on people. I think Jean, you had your hand up. It's nice to see
Jean
you.
Parker. Yeah, I'm the board chair of Bethesda Metro Area Village, and we're I'm in my 3rd year of chairmanship. We have 2 to 3 year terms, so depending on the need, what the board wants and what the current chair wants. Just interested to hear about board training, and obviously succession is a big issue. And certainly now that COVID is over, how are people getting their boards back together from Zoom? Because
great point. Yeah,
great, but it's hard to really build relationships that much just over Zoom.
And I think, Jean, I worked with your village on strategic planning about a year or so ago, and it was one of the first meetings you had back in person. Yeah.
And that was just a small group, and we're really making great progress on our strategic planning.
Glad to hear that. Let's finish introductions, and then I'd be happy to talk a little bit about re-engagement post-COVID. But I'm just going to kind of call on people. I'm just going to go around my screen if that's okay. Sharon, you're unmuted. Village of Kensington.
Hi, with the same village as Terry, who just left us. And as she said, we're a village in transition with a really good president stepping down after 4 years at least. And we're wrestling with all the same issues. I'm glad to hear other groups you're wrestling with. Where do you find new members? How do you get people to engage? It's easier to get people to do to serve as volunteers in direct service, giving rides or doing errands. It's really hard to get people to join us to make activities happen. And our big question is, how do we move from being a body of the whole, where the whole, our 9-member board are sort of making decisions as a group all the time, to a committee-based structure where the work gets done in committees. The key is people. You need people to do
People
that.
to do the work. Yep. Joyce, what village are you with?
I'm with the president of Rapid Home Village. We're Western Virginia up against the Shenandoah National Park, so a very rural village. So we have some unique issues because of that. But in general, thank you for this discussion, everyone. This is really good. The problems and the issues, the things that we're thinking about and addressing are exactly the same things that the rest of you are talking about. Board training, succession planning, all those kinds of things. So thank you all for putting the session on for us.
Nice to have you here. I lived in Stanton, Virginia for a few years, so I think that might be close to you. Linda, what board are you with?
I'm with
Or what village, pardon me?
Village at Kentlands and Lakelands. And we're in a unique position in that we've been a village operating since 2016, but we were under a foundation, and we've just incorporated and gotten our 501c3 approval for us as a separate entity. So we're transitioning, and as a group under the foundation, we had a steering committee that managed things, and their board didn't do much other than worry about the liability they might have regarding money and hiring. Those are the only 2 areas they really got involved in. We were the operating group. And now, as we've restructured ourselves, we've put in a board of about 6 people, but 3 of those 6 people are on the steering committee, and we're the group that's doing the operating. So our structure is a little different. And I mean, this is all, we incorporated at the end of May. So this is all very
brand new. Yes.
In this structure. But we've been operating, and we're trying to reinvigorate ourselves as a part of this transition, because we have a problem with not enough volunteers.
Yeah, I understand. I did ask for introductions. I want to make sure there's also plenty of time for people to ask me questions or have discussions. So Carolyn, we'll just go for you. You know, what village are you in? And we've got maybe 3 other people to introduce themselves to.
Right. Hi, everyone. My name's Carolyn, and I'm with Low Link. It's a village kind of close to where Joyce is, in the Piedmont of Virginia, near Fredericksburg. And our village is about 8 years old. And I served on our board for the first 6 years of our operation, including 2 as the board chair. So I guess you could say I'm one of those former board members who's trying to not get in the way of the current board. We hired we always had some paid staff, but in the past year we hired an ED, and so we've been in the process of bringing on the new ED into our operations.
Right. Let's see. I've got Doran, Leanne, Arthur, and maybe Joyce and Scott left to introduce themselves. Just your name and your organization's great. Whatever you want to share.
Hey there, I'm Doran Flowers. I'm with Little Falls Village here in Bethesda, and I was plucked a little less than a year ago from the volunteer pool to become executive director, and so. Just by virtue of that, the board has been working really hard to bring me along. But at some point, there'll be a reversal, unfortunately, I believe, and where I'll need to make sure that our board doesn't work too hard and we get some new energies in there as well. So that's where we are. Thanks.
Great.
Arthur Becker, I am a brand new board member of Potomac Community Village, and I mean brand new, like last week. And, I'm a little bit overwhelmed with all the discussions, but I'm here to learn, and maybe we'll be successful in helping our board.
Leanne and then Judith and then Leanne, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Judy Walters. I'm in the same village as Sharon and Terry, who's also here. And I'm delighted that we can all participate because the issues that are being discussed are certainly relevant right now. We're, as Sharon described very effectively, we're moving from having a wonderful chair to hoping to find someone who will be willing to step into that role, and thinking about how we can best organize the village members of the board to contribute. So thank you, Sharon, and Terry, and hopefully we can collude after this, and thank you all.
My name is Leanne Dorsey. I'm with Burning Tree Village, and I think I've got Arthur beat because I haven't even gone to my first board meeting. I don't go until September. The nominating committee presented and the board voted in June, but we don't have the next board meeting until September.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Did I missed maybe Scott and maybe Joyce, last two introductions. Go ahead, Scott. Oh, I think you're still muted though.
Sorry. I'm Scott Barkin. I'm the Vice President of Reston for a Lifetime, which is a village-like entity in Reston, Virginia. Our mission is slightly different. It's more about informing and educating about aging in place versus actually providing services. But we do a lot of education and outreach. And we have a small board right now, only 6, but it's going to be 9 within 2 months. Right. So we're all the talk about matrices and things like that was very helpful because we're growing the board. It's a working board. We don't have staff. We have an intern, but I do much of I'm also the treasurer at the moment, and I'm the one that started it as a nonprofit too. For me, but anyway, it's
good for you. So I think we've got everybody introduced. Do people have specific questions or comments or particular? We've had several issues, named in terms of succession planning and other things. Is there anything you'd like me to dive deeper in to?
Yeah, I think I have a question. I've had a couple of people comment to me lately that we have a large board, and we have a 12-person board, and I do think it is on the larger side. I'm curious to know if you think there is any one right answer as to an effective board size for a group such as ours, smaller nonprofit.
Yeah, I think so. I do think the short answer is it depends. But I think there are a couple things to keep in mind in terms of board size. Bylaws should certainly state a minimum and a not to exceed number. So making sure that your bylaws are set on that. Often it is recommended that boards have an odd number of people so that you don't have a tie if you have a close vote. My board from time to time has gone to an even number, and we've just not worried about it, because what are you going to do? And we don't always have unanimous votes, that it works out kind of thing. So I think in terms of getting the work done, it depends a little bit on how much of your board is, quote, working. Do you have paid staff? There's often an idea that we need to grow the board. We need more people. But with that comes management challenges if you do have a staff person, right? And you have to have a majority of people at meetings so that you can have a quorum and things like that. So while I don't think there's an exact size, I always think something in the, and this is maybe for a little larger, but in the 9 to 11 range or the 11 to 13 range. So I don't think you're too large if people feel valued, if there are things for them to do, if it works, if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of thing. Certainly if you're certain boards work in different ways. If you have a committee structure where you want to have more than one person on a committee, you need to figure out, are you going to have just board members as committee members, or do your committees draw from your population, which is a great way to think about succession, making sure that you bring people into committees where possible who are not already board members, but they can, get a flavor of it. They can get a flavor of the board. You can get a flavor for them. So it's a great place from which to recruit new members if you're bringing them onto committees where they're not board members yet. So I don't think there's an exact number. I would think for this side, for most of the villages, if I think of a certain size, I would think probably no more than 15 would be the top. I think otherwise it would be a little unwieldy.
Is there a number that's too small? What should be the minimum on a board?
That's a good
for
question.
effective-
I don't know if there's actually like a legal guidance on this. Most boards and their bylaws require you to have, I think it's 3 named positions, right? The president, the treasurer. You have to have a secretary. I just drew a huge blank. I should know that, but
Yeah.
certainly the named positions that are in your bylaw. But I mean, I think a healthier number is probably at least 5 to 7 so that you have dialogue, you can split up the work, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was asking for effective leadership, not meeting the minimum requirements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think, if you're thinking about, we've got a certain number of work to be done, probably at least 7, 6 to 7, something like that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And listen, I'm happy to round robin on different topics here, seal whatever, whatever you think's best.
I would be curious to know how many villages, like how often the board comes together, where there's whether or not there's an executive committee that meets regularly between board meetings, but just a little bit about sort of the moving the train along.
And then I will pick up after people have a chance to say some of that. I'll pick up on Jean's point about kind of getting the board back together post-COVID.
Yes, very good point. Please do go ahead and talk about that.
You want me to do that first?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead
okay.
and do that.
So it's an interesting challenge, right? Because it's easy to sit in front of your computer and hop on Zoom. Yet back to some of the points that were made in our general session, particularly by Pazit, I think the collegiality, getting to know one another, having fun with one another, learning from one another. You just don't have that chance to talk with someone before the meeting where you're getting your cup of coffee or, walking into the meeting together. That doesn't happen on Zoom. Different organizations are doing this different ways that I'm aware of. I don't exactly know what villages are doing, but what I can say for my own board and boards that I serve on, my board chair has been very specific about wanting to get people back in person, and yet using Zoom strategically when we can. So we meet every other month, and every other meeting we're doing in person versus online. Particularly, we have a January meeting, which I've driven home in the snow too often. So we're doing that one online. It's January, the weather's likely to be bad. Why would we have to deal with that kind of thing? So I think there are different ways to go about it, but I'm doing this with my staff. I'm doing this with other organizations that I'm part of. We have missed a lot, in my opinion. The things that happen kind of aside from the meeting. I don't know how to put it, but you have a side conversation with someone coming in, you get to know someone, you walk out, you see their car, you whatever. It's those things which are so important in whatever organization I think we're in, that kind of collegiality, the trust building and all of that. So I do think while it seems easy, I think we're losing effectiveness when we stay on Zoom all the time. But it can be used strategically. Like, you know, you want to bring in a guest. Let's say one of the villages here wants to bring in a guest from the western part of Virginia or something like that. By all means, do that on Zoom if that's going to work. But I do think it's really important to, and I don't know, Jean, what you've seen with your village, whether people don't want to do any meetings in person, but I think it is important to strike the balance.
We have some people who are very cautious. So it's trying to accommodate everyone. And I'm just wondering if other villages have had that same experience, or if they can tried compromising on having at least 1 or 2 meetings in person.
Our villages of Kensington has been in person for a long months, maybe before the beginning of the year. We haven't, there was, masks are an individual decision lately, no masks. And we think about it, we worry about it, but we're pressing forward. We also have had a few in-person events, mostly lunches at restaurants. We try to be outside when we can to accommodate those who are more comfortable, but we're but it's slow and it's hard. And we're getting more volunteers to come to events than members. And maybe that's age, I don't know.
Yeah. So there are a couple hands raised. I'm just going to go down the line, Leanne, and then Doran, and then you're not Diane, but I've forgotten your first name already. Go ahead, Leanne.
I just have a quick question, and it's actually not really relevant to Burning Tree Village because we don't have any paid staff, but I am on another board. In fact, I'm on the executive committee of another board. And this issue was a little vague in the discussion, and I just wanted to get clarity on at least what your thoughts are. And that's the presence of the ED in executive committee meetings versus the presence of the ED at board meetings. Because somehow when people were answering the question, they didn't seem to be answering the same question. And
okay.
That's all.
So when my view is that executive committees often meet separately from the board. Just by way of example, my executive committee meets about 2 weeks before our board meeting. I make sure I'm raising issues. This is what I think the agenda is going to look like. What do you have? The board, all of that. And so the ED, I think, should always be meeting with the executive committee. I think the question that came to us was the ED is left out of some of these executive committee meetings where decisions are being made. And I thought that seems like a bad practice, and I wasn't quite sure what was going on there. And
yeah, I mean, I always thought that the executive committee by definition included the ED. That's almost why you have the meetings. But then when I think it was Bill spoke, it looked like they were talking about the larger board, and I was just curious. That's all.
There can be a time when boards go into what is called an executive session. Right. And if I recall correctly, I think he was talking about that as a tool that the boards can use if there's something sensitive to talk about that they want to discuss.
The implication of that then is that the ED is at the board meeting unless you go into executive session. Is that?
Yeah, and the ED's always at the board meeting is my experience and best practice. Absolutely involved there. Yeah.
Can you define who would be in the executive session? Executive committee.
So the two different concepts. Executive committee would be your chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, your named officers.
Yeah.
Executive session of a board meeting involves all board members.
Oh.
Yeah. It's a tool to use to set aside time where you need to have a discussion that wouldn't immediately involve the executive director. for instance, my board keeps an executive session on every meeting agenda because often if there needs to be executive session, there would be, quote, a problem to discuss, right? A concern, an issue, that kind of thing. Yet my board has from time to time, if they wanted to discuss a salary change that wasn't in our regular budgeting or something for me that they wanted to discuss that was positive, but it needs to be go through executive suggestion, that executive session. Doran, I think you're up next.
Sure, let's go back to the original question. We are doing monthly meetings now, and we are, as of a few months ago, doing in person, although there are a couple of people who really prize the convenience and ease of Zoom. So we end up, they participate usually by phone, with my phone sitting in the middle of the table.
Yep.
But I think definitely there's been a camaraderie built around just eating together, and hanging out a little bit before and afterwards and kind of being together. So I'm a thumbs up on that one.
Thank you. Frank.
Hi, yes, Frank Catone. It used to be I Only Home for Life. It's now Greater I Only Go Rides, and we changed our name basically to let people know what we really do in the community. But one of the things we're having difficulty is getting people back into the board meeting in person. Since COVID, definitely Zoom's the way, and it's gotten convenient for everybody, you know. And so our board meetings usually are at night around 7 o'clock. It's once a month. We do have committees on the board, and everybody comes, you know, ready to provide the board with the information on their committee. But it seems like it's very difficult, but we are losing that camaraderie between the board members. I can see a decline. You know, like everybody else said, trying to get into that mode of succession planning. I think it's a big thing for all villages, you know, trying to get volunteers to step into that role, especially the director's role. We're seeing that on there, but trying to getting back to the basic question, trying to get people back into one-to-one into a meeting room has been difficult. Any suggestions?
I don't have a magic fix for that. Oh, Joyce, I see your hand. Let me just say two quick things and then I'll recognize you. I just think, and I've made this expectation with my staff, and luckily my board chair has made it with the board. It is convenient, yet it can also be a crutch, I think. And while we want to honor the benefits, you know, like I said, our board meets in January by Zoom. It's cold, it's dark, there's likelihood of bad weather coming home. We don't want to do that. So I think if you can set up a system where you can have both, and the expectation is when you're in person, because there's some things we want to do together that are more efficient for the long run and better for our overall work together in person. I just think that's an expectation to set and go from there. Joyce, you're going to add something?
One more thing real quick. Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of them, like maybe a mistake or not, the chair put it to a vote.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and now we're trying to say, okay, you know, her and I are talking, and we're trying now to say, okay, wait a minute, you know, the board voted to meet by Zoom. So now we're in this little quandary here, trying to figure out, okay, how do we now kindly say, you know, let's do once a month, you know, Zoom, one, you know, on hand. But that's where we're faced with the issue now.
Yeah, well, I don't know, this is a tough one, right? But I think sometimes you just kind of have to force the issue and say, here's where I go with my pilot idea. Let's just try it for the fall and spring. Let's do one meeting in person each time. Let's pilot it, see how it goes. Provide some really yummy food, you know, get the energy up, do what you have to do for people to recognize, because most people do join a board to be with other, you know, there's something about being with other people. So Joyce and then Linda, I think.
I just wanted to add, I agree with everything that everyone has said, and our village certainly lost a lot of the camaraderie by doing everything by Zoom as well. But we're back to meeting in person. The thing that I wanted to add, though, to that is that because of the nature of the age of people and who we are here in our community, a lot of our people take 3-4 months and go off to their cottage in Maine or their place in Florida. So we have always had a process. It's not always easy to have a mixed meeting with people in the room and then Zoom, but we've always said that if you are on your, up in Maine for the summer, please join in by Zoom. And it doesn't always work as ideally as it ought to, because we sometimes have to pass the computer around and sound is an issue and, all those things. And we're not sophisticated in how we have it all set up. But anyway, that seems to work as a partial way to handle a few people who are either not here or who may be really uncomfortable with being in a room with others.
Thank you. Linda, did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to suggest if you try and do like spring and fall, maybe you could have the meetings outdoors on somebody's patio.
True too.
And that helps allay the fears. And I will, just for a point of reference, I'm one of the people that's reluctant. I have met in person, but I'm very careful where and when and who, because I'm immunocompromised and I have pulmonary issues to start with. So I'm really scared and concerned about my contacts. I do wear a mask when I am with other people, as much as I hate it. But that's just a perspective that could be useful. Some people really have a need to be ultra conservative about what they do, and yet you want them to participate.
Right. And thank you. I hope I didn't appear insensitive in saying that we need to get back, because there are some very real concerns that people have, and there are ways to mask, to meet outside, to meet in a larger room than you might otherwise meet in, and allow people to be pulled back from a table, so to speak, so that you can still be in conversation, but you're creating some distance, even with a mask, which is a good, kind of way to treat it. So I thank you for bringing that up, Linda. I appreciate that.
I have a question, Kathy. And it does have to do with the organization who raised this question didn't come to the meeting this morning, but I fear that the director is going to leave their position because their board is so heavy-handed, particularly their board chair, who seems to think that the director is her assistant. And when the board chair, excuse me, when the board let me see, sorry, I get to get the details. The board secretary had to take a 4-month leave, maybe surgery, I have no idea what whatever, from the role. The board chair asked the ED to take minutes of the board meetings for 4 months. And, the ED didn't really feel that she could say no to the board chair. And so I just feel that she, the board chair is taking advantage of the staffer. That's my perspective as an outsider. And that's just one small example of what's going on. And I don't know, it made me wonder. I do know that when there are board meetings, sometimes the staff has to prepare reports. I certainly have to do a report. I have to, but I don't feel like it's my job to pretty up the reports and make them easy for the board members to read and spend extra time, which this director has to do. The board chair has said you need to compile in a packet, the board packets, because the board members are very busy and they, you need to present it in an easy to read manner. And this ED is spending a couple hours every month preparing a beautifully presented board packet. And it's just, as an outsider, looking in, I just feel that the ED is being taken advantage of by a very, strong board chair.
Mhm. Yeah. Sometimes relationships get too far down a pathway where they can't be salvaged. But if there is something that would help, maybe they need some sort of facilitated conversation between the two of them, a mediated conversation, a facility, whatever you want to call it. Um, if the ED doesn't feel like he or she can say to the board chair, this is not working. Here's what I propose as a compromise, or I'll take one of the board meeting minutes and can you rotate it among other board members? If the ED doesn't feel like they have that type of communication channel to the board chair, then that is a real challenge. I know I can say to my board chair, I prefer not to do this way. Here's what I think. We go back and forth like that on a lot of things. So I just don't know whether it's hard to speak about, something where we don't know the details, but maybe it's a facilitated conversation. Does that person want to stay?
Yeah.
What would work? What do other board members see? What are their observations of the board chair? I mean, maybe they need just someone to come in and do a little coaching 360 look, an outside consultant, if you will.
I actually liked your suggestion about board training, whatever that might look like, but some regular, once a year as new board members come on, these are appropriate boundaries, these are not, that sort of thing.
This is what we expect of the ED. This is the time he or she has on their paid contract. This is what we expect of board members. This is what we expect of the chair. Jerry, you've got.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, is there a job description? I'm wondering if that was ever part of the job description for the ED, because I wouldn't dream of asking.
There is, yeah.
Well, and the other thing that sometimes I have staff do, if a staff of mine is saying, I have too much to do. I can't pretty up the reports or whatever. I say, let's just do a little, what I call a desk audit. How much time are you spending on things? Help me understand where the pinch points are. And the ED could suggest that to the board chair to say, I just wanted to kind of get a better sense of where my time was being spent so I could match it with our priorities, assuming they have agreed priorities, but that could be another starting place, as you said, with training. So I audited my work hours for the last month or 2 weeks or whatever it is. Here's what I found.
Yeah, I did that exercise some years ago. I've only done it that one time because I know some villages, when staff, we do have some paid staff. I do know that at some villages, not ours, but others, they have to categorize by cost center.
Yes.
What kind of the nature of their activity.
Right.
I don't do that. So our village doesn't operate that way. So it is a good exercise every few years or whatever, to see where your the time sucks are.
Where your time, where your time spent. And how does that match up with priorities? Do you have an annual plan for these are the priorities, and who is going to shepherd those priorities? Who's going to be, who's the point person? What supports are needed? Couple hands up. Go ahead, Frank, and then Leah.
I was going to say, sometimes in a leadership position, we get very comfortable when somebody performs very well in a certain task or position. And so, when the secretary in this particular case has left for 4 months and another staff person picks up that role of the minutes or whatever else and does a nice job, I think sometimes people have a way of saying, I really like what's being presented and how it's being presented, and leans on that person and just very comfortable. And as you indicated, that's when that discussion has to take place that, yes, I was willing to do this for a certain period of time. Now we need to move on. But I think that sometimes it's just more about people feeling comfortable the ways, the job's being done. And so we'll lean on that person more than anybody else. Just my observation sometimes.
Great point. Leanne, then Jean.
I am aware that these questions may be from the point of view of a newbie, but I'm just interested. As I said, Burning Tree Village does not have any paid staff. To the best of my knowledge, as a member of the village, we make voluntary contributions upon receiving the village directory, upon receiving a services directory. We don't do anything else. I honestly don't know, and probably should, whether there's any funding from the county or anything like that. But I can't imagine how we would pay an executive director. So I'm just curious how that works.
Does anyone want to talk about their models?
I'll share. We have what we consider a relatively modest structure for membership fees, which cover about half of our expenses. We get a small grant from the county, and we no longer have to apply it. We get it we don't no longer have to apply for it. We get it regularly now. And then I personally, every time I hear of a grant, will apply for those as well to fill in the amount of money. We operate on a shoestring. We have a paid staff person for only 15 hours a week. And I try to use her very, very carefully. And I check in with her once a week to find out how her time is being spent. And to tell you the truth, I take on a lot of the load to keep her load down. We pay her a decent salary, I think $25 an hour. For us, it works beautifully because she is a graduate student. She goes to classes at night. She can work from home. It's win-win. But the finance part is difficult. And I think that having the membership fees that we have, even though they're very low for Montgomery County, keeps our newer member number down. It's harder to recruit members because we do charge. And I keep reminding folks that it costs money to run a village. People think we're a volunteer organization. It should be free. We can't do it. We can't do it that way. And I don't think our village could have succeeded without help, without paid help.
That's interesting because I mean, I believe that the assumption of our village is that you live here, you're a member of our village.
Burning Tree has been that way. I was involved in the village idea many, many, many years ago. Harry, I forget his name, your founder, was one of the
I'm a newcomer. I've been here for 20 years.
Okay. They never charged. Burning Tree never charged. And I can remember going to a very, very early meeting before Pazit came on, where the guy that was the head of Palisades said, if in his experience, the villages that succeed are those that have paid help. And I've never, ever forgotten that. And I believe it. I truly believe in the importance of it. Burning Tree was wonderful in that you did have all this volunteer, and they were always volunteer led, and it's two different concepts.
Right, and look at Bill, who was on the panel with the Mount Pleasant Village. His is all volunteer, and I think very successful. So Leanne, you might check in with Pazit to just get some further guidance on her perspective with Montgomery County villages. Jerry, I forget what your village is. It's
Greater Stonegate Village.
Greater Stonegate, yeah. And Seal, you probably have some things to add here. I don't know. And Jean's got her hand up, of course. So,
well, Jean, you go ahead. You got your hand up, and if there's time, I can comment.
Well, my first comment would be to your question, Seal, on if you have these issues with the that you brought up with the board chair and the executive director, or that conflict. We had something similar early on, and we actually had Pazit come in and basically give a presentation to the board on what a board is supposed to do. And she does a wonderful job. And so it really helped clarify to many people what the job of the board was versus the executive director, and how to keep that relationship healthy. So if that village is in Montgomery County, I would recommend that they get in touch with Pazit. And then,
I actually think whether or not they're in Montgomery County, because it could be a really great resource. I mean, I know she can't spend her time with non-Montgomery, but I think the key is to get a third party weighing in.
I do
Yeah.
too, for training or role clarification, whatever you want to call it.
It just points again to your comment, Kathy, about the need to, when you have to keep a board healthy and keep expectations realistic and to keep everyone's roles clear, that a third party, subject matter expert who has experience with boards, you just can't beat that. I mean, the board chair can you can't help but respect that perspective, and that takes the staffer off the hot seat.
Right.
Yeah. Leanne, I just wanted to, I think so many times we've had the conversation about all volunteer villages versus staffed village. And I think wherever you fall on the spectrum, we do have membership dues, and they are probably on the higher end. I think everybody needs to feel comfortable in explaining to your constituents, whether it's the county, the city, a donor, a potential member, a potential volunteer, why you have it, why why you can't do something because you're all volunteer and we don't charge membership, or why you why you have your membership set where you do. I think everybody needs to feel comfortable where you landed and be able to explain it. Wherever we are on that spectrum. I'll always remember we had back when we were doing in-person wave meetings quarterly. Our quarterly wave meetings were in person, and I'll be thrilled to have an in-person meeting in October when we do that. I remember it was our village's turn to host, and we used to do Virginia, Maryland, DC, and just kind of take turns hosting an in-person gathering. And I was walking we were walking out of the meeting. Again, my village had hosted, so we had a community center that we were using for the meeting. And as I'm walking out with 3 other village leaders, 2 of them from an all volunteer village, and the other one had a little bit of paid staff. But Eddie Rivas, who was at the time from an all volunteer village, said, "This is a great facility. Do y'all have a lot of meetings here?" And I said, "Oh no, very rarely, because we have to pay a rental fee." He's like, "But you're a nonprofit." I'm like, "Eddie, there are 120 nonprofits in our city. Nothing is even cheap, let alone nothing's free. Nothing is free. We don't get free rent. Every church basement has been taken up by another nonprofit." So I think as long as you convey why your budget is what it is and why your fees, I just think that's an important thing, to be able to feel confident and proud if you don't have any membership dues, but don't apologize for what you can't do, because you remember you're a no dues paying village. And I have to be just as comfortable to explain why our membership fee is where it is, wherever we are.
And being certain that you have a plan in place to do what you can do with budget, without budget, with staff, without staff. And if you want to shift that as a village, well, then there's a strategic planning process for that too that can be done. So
yeah, I was going to say it also can have something to do with the life cycle of the village. Our village started out with no fees and very enthusiastic founders and volunteers. But over 6 or 7 years, people are now in their 80s. They're tired of doing it. COVID didn't help because so much stopped that you didn't maintain the stream of volunteers and maybe members, although you were more likely to have members who needed help, but volunteers were harder to come by. And at some point, actually, our foundation wanted us to charge some fees and pushed us into it. And there was a lot of resistance, but it works and people do it. And we're in the process of hiring people to help because we don't have enough volunteers and we're all getting very burned out. And so it can be a life cycle issue, whether it can evolve to where you need to do that so that you can hire staff, so that you can sustain the organization.
And one last little thing that I would mention, and I've been wrestling with this idea, finding volunteers that then will become village members, because right, one of the thing with villages, it has this perception that it's just for aging people. But all of us, no matter where we're going to be, are going to be on that trajectory, right? So how do you bring in people? If there's someone to do communications and website in Montgomery County, do you get an intern from Montgomery College or the universities at Shady Grove or your local high school, so that younger people are understanding what the village concept is and having some touch point with it? And you also get an intern or a volunteer, they can get student service learning hours or something like that, who brings the skills, brings a different energy than your membership might have. So I think it's just interesting to think about that.
We've just started to do more intergenerational events. Like last weekend, we did a stargazing event in the neighborhood. The clouds didn't cooperate, but people came, and we had over 30 people. 2 of us were regular board members. 2 of us, well, my husband and I, board members. There was 1 gift member, 5 volunteers, and the rest were young families with little kids. And that was so exciting for me personally. I mean, I had ice cream and popsicles for the kids, and little cakes and water. But I had an opportunity to go around and speak to each and every one of these young people about why we're doing what we're doing. And they were telling, we're more and more accepted in the neighborhood because we do so many things. But now they're starting to come, and I can't tell you how good it felt. How that will develop in terms of volunteers, I don't know. Of course, I had all my brochures out, and I'm hoping, that I can reach out. But I think more and more of that, helps to get the younger folks in. Yeah.
That feels like a good success story to end on. Do we end at noon, or am I trying to end us
We
prematurely?
do end at noon. Leanne, did you have a
thought it was-
comment you wanted to finish
I-
real quick?
I thought it was 12:30 according to what I have on my calendar, but
Oh, I'm sorry. We generally do end at 12. We figure 2.5
Okay.
hours with your wave comrades is long enough for anybody to have to. But we will bring up this topic again. I think it was something that a lot of people wanted to have a chance to discuss.
I would.
And
Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, I would say 2 things. One is I appreciate Linda's comment, because we have volunteers that, for example, are putting out professional grade directories and are, I don't know how old, but suffice it to say that I am the youngest member of our board, and I'm not young. And
You look young.
Thank you for that. And the other thing I'll just throw in as an example that we did of necessity during COVID, which was wonderful for the young families, and that is that we did Halloween by having all the households come to the street and put up their tables. And so everybody was talking to each other across the street and engaging with the parents and who were following behind and engaging with kids. And it was lovely.
Oh, I love that.
That's it. It's after 12. I'm sorry.
I love that. Kathy, I want to thank you for being so generous with your time this morning. I know you've got a full-time job as a director yourself, and I think this has really been a good conversation to have.
Good. It's been my pleasure. I love the work I've done with the villages, and if anyone wants to follow up and contact me, maybe Seal with the follow-up materials, I'd be happy to have my contact information in there.
Wonderful.
Thank you
Kathy.
all. Thank you.
Thank you all for contributing to this conversation. Thank you for coming in the summer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Good luck, everybody.
Okay, look forward to
everyone.
seeing everybody
Bye.
next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.